Hi, everyone. I'm Megan Moeller, a productivity enthusiast here at ActivTrak and your tour guide of sorts for today and in other sessions. So, if you have come to one of these sessions before, welcome back. And if it's your first time, I'd love to say welcome. I'm so glad you're here. If you are just joining us, you may have joined and you might see a poll on your screen. We'd really love to understand your biggest challenge with your current workplace policy, whether that's your workplace return to work policy or just your workplace policy in general. You may need to scroll down to go through the different answers. So just go ahead and do that and choose the one that best fits what's going on with you and your organization. Go ahead and take that while I'm going through housekeeping items. I won't be offended if you multitask. We are recording today's session and we will also send the recording out within the next day or so. So check your email that you registered with for that information. We do have 30 minutes for today's session, and if we do have time, we will take questions. So what I would recommend doing is actually popping in questions as we go along. And then if we're able to get to them, then we will go ahead and make sure that we get those covered if time allows for the session. And so right now, before we move into content for today, let's go ahead and take a look at these poll results. I'm going to give you just like another few seconds here. I really want your feedback, so I'm gonna just kind of give it just another few if you want to get your responses in. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and end the poll. And let's see what it looks like here is we've got about, let's see, I'm just kind of scrolling through. Okay, so about 28% aren't sure, and that's okay. We've got about 22% that have said they have not experienced significant challenge, that's great to hear. And then we also have 22% saying that ensuring equity between employees working remotely and those who are working in office is one of the biggest challenges. So that's a good backdrop for us to have as we, go into today's conversation. And so I want to go ahead and actually move into that. So today's session, maximizing workforce ROI, lessons from preferred rate mortgage and ActivTrak. At this time, I would really like to go ahead and and invite our speakers on camera. We have co-founder and VP of Operations at Preferred Rate Mortgage, Chris Lakousas, and we have Chief Customer Officer and Head of ActivTrak's Productivity Lab, Gabriella Mauk, on with us today. And actually, Gabriella is going to go ahead and take you through today's session with Chris. Again, if you have questions, go ahead and pop them in while the discussion is happening. And if we have time, we will make sure to get to them. And with that, over to you, Gabriella.
Thanks, Megan, and thank you, Chris, for joining us, and thank you to everyone else who's made the decision to carve time out of their busy calendars to join us as well. These are absolutely my favorite types of webinars. I think the opportunity to hear from people like you, Chris, to share your own experience using ActivTrak and really what brought you to us and gave us the privilege of this partnership is always so helpful to hear firsthand. So thank you for making the time to do that. What
Happy
I'd
to be here.
love
Thank you.
of course, of course. What I'd love to start with is sort of the easy ones. The opportunity for you to introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about preferred rate, and your experience in life pre-active track and that build up in terms of what led you to considering workforce analytics as a solution for you and your team.
Absolutely. Well, from my standpoint, I'm Chris Lakousas. I'm the VP of Operations and co-founder of Preferred Rate. We are a mortgage banking institution. I have employees that, span across the whole country in different various locations. I also have physical locations across the country that employees do report into. So we're not 100% remote, but we do have the vast majority of folks working from home. When we started as an organization that had approximately 7 employees, and over the last 15 years have grown upwards to around 720 full-time staffed employees across the United States. So our footprint is very large and widespread. So it really was an easy decision for us to get into, searching for a partner that would help us with the analytics, especially when we hit the pandemic, because we really couldn't understand or equate how people working remotely was going to fully impact our productivity and our workload balance and things that, would be a concern of an employer that was generally somebody that wanted their folks in person. The mortgage industry as a whole, was a very high lease exposure industry where we had operational facilities all over the country. So it was a foreign animal for us to have people working from home at that type of number. And it was very difficult for us to understand how that would impact us, physically and financially, whether it be workflow or efficiency. We wanted to get the highest level of productivity from our staff.
Mhm. And I'm curious, and as you think about that time period where, there was just that rush to be remote during that COVID era, if you will, did you think it was temporary in that, or did you think that this might be a turning point for the mortgage industry in general to become more distributed and more remote?
So I myself found it to be an opportune time for us to shed some additional costs as far as office space expenditures. First and foremost, I mean, we all know that bringing people into one location could be very expensive. I also felt like I wanted to build my best team possible. If I want to put the best team on the field on a daily basis, I can't be beholden to a small subset or one individual market to be able to build that kind of team. So, in order for me to branch out and pull in the best players and to give myself the opportunity to compete with my peers out there in the market, I had to conform and I had to go mostly remote in order to capture the best players.
Mhm. So let's talk about that a little bit because I think what I'm hearing you reference, Chris, is a conversation that I suspect happens at the C-suite level time and time again, quarter over quarter, which is there's a lot of cost savings to be had and talent gains to be had if we were to be remote or if we were to be more distributed. And then across that table, there's frequently the objection, which is there really a cost savings if we're going to lose in productivity? And so that is obviously something that you all, as well as our other customers within our base, have that wrestle, right? And saying, am I saving money in one place and losing money in the other? And of course, what we would suggest is that you have the ability to control for that. And so I'd ask you that question, right? Was there that fear or did your leadership team engage in that type of discussion? And then how did you leverage ActivTrak to give you that confidence that you were going to save on both sides?
That's a great question because yes, it absolutely. To be honest with you, before ActivTrak, it was an ongoing discussion for a good 3-year period. We actually couldn't quantify the impacts of remote work without leveraging a platform like ActivTrak because you can make assumptions about what people are doing or how effective or efficient they're being, or not being, I should say, whether they're in the office or they're working remotely. And we have come to find that our employees have actually been physically more productive and more accountable in their own home and working remotely from various locations, specifically because we've cut down on a lot of the minutia in their daily grind. Now, ever since COVID, people have had more responsibilities when it comes to their children. I think that there's been a big shift in what people have to do to get kids off to school timely. And I'm experiencing that in my own home as well. Just trying to make sure that our daily life is in order because we're working to live, we're not living to work, and we need that balance. And if people
Mhm.
do have the ability to maintain that balance in their personal life with some of those flexibilities, they are going to perform at a higher level. So I have been able to quantify the productivity by using ActivTrak. And anytime that conversation has ever arisen, I'm from Missouri. It's the show me state. You got to show me the numbers, right? So I'm able to quantify all of that, whether it be by graph with nice, beautiful, bright colors or just by sheer numbers and reporting. And, it's been pretty glorious being on the winning end of those discussions.
Awesome. Awesome. Let's talk about how that looks across your organization, right? I mean, it's clear in your role as a operations executive and as a co-founder, you're looking at um, presumably roll-ups of the ActivTrak data, right? Likely not spending your day getting into exactly what someone was doing at 10:07, of course. And so let's talk a little bit about how you've strategically managed, how you began and then how you evolved and how you've managed federating that data, if you will, in the right way that sort of preserves people's comfort, but doesn't shackle you with sort of that full burden of doing something with those insights. How was that journey for you, and what does it look like today?
So the journey began, looking for something to leverage as an accountability tool. Okay, more so than an efficiency and a performance management tool. I was looking for something to kind of quantify, what people were doing, on a daily basis. And with a staff as large as ours, if people aren't performing, that leads to financial leakage and it leads to additional hires and potentially bringing on additional technology to do some of those roles, which essentially cost money per unit. And if our unit cost goes up exponentially, then we're not profitable, right? So it was an accountability standard that I was trying to set up front. And through my conversations with my contacts at ActivTrak, I was able to quickly learn what other insights the software was able to give me. We were able to set up different parameters surrounding productivity per different groups of employees, basically understanding that we were expecting them to be productive 6 to 6.5 hours in a day, and coming to find that people were actually exceeding that, or people were working greater than that time period and putting in more effort during that time period. But what it also allowed us to do was look into the different applications that we were using. What subscriptions were we enrolling in, and how often were those subscriptions being used? It even gave us insights into whether or not the person may have had a latency issue with their networking equipment. I've actually provided people with updated networking equipment in their homes, specifically because I knew that they had the desire to work hard. It's just that they couldn't do it in an efficient and effective manner because they were running with shackles and leg irons, right? So there's been a lot that has evolved over time with how my team has leveraged the software. So when I get my reporting every morning, I'm not looking at it through the lens of what was Susie doing at 10:07, as you said. I'm looking to see, okay, what did we get done during this time frame? Was this team productive, during their, 7 to 8 hours of work on the clock? How did that look? Did we experience latency somewhere with one of our applications? Was there an outage of some sort? How do we solve for this going forward to make sure that this is an anomaly and not a consistent issue? So, the on-demand reporting that I'm able to pull at any given moment is super helpful, but also the daily reminders that I get from the software. When I get in the morning, I'm able to take a look at that and address that on my team meetings in the morning. So that way my staff knows, hey, this is something that we could probably improve on. This is why our turn times, kind of fell behind today. Let's take a look at making a change. Maybe we need to address, one individual or another to get them, to where they need to be. And it gives us an opportunity to, have a coaching moment.
Mhm. I love that about your approach, Chris, right? Because just in the story that you've shared, the piece that stands out to me, which comes as no surprise given the strength of our partnership, is the curiosity and the inquiry that you adopt as an approach and a mindset to leveraging the solution, right? The resistance to draw rapid conclusions, but instead leveraging the insight to go figure out where to efficiently be curious and inquire, and then go and take an action that can improve that environment, right? And I think that those coaching moments are, of course, those that we aim to create so that we can ultimately, bring people along. One of the things that I'd be curious to understand is how you partner perhaps with your business leaders, your HR organization, your finance organization to really bring the data together and arrive to some of the conclusions and the decisions that you have. Is it a partnership across those functions, or does this tend to sit more holistically in the ops organization?
No, this is a partnership, of course, because I'm actually sharing those analytics, and I work very closely with HR and with the finance team, specifically because I need to keep them in the loop as to whether or not we're operating efficiently and effectively. Because ultimately, we're a for-profit business. We want, to have good margins, and we want to be, profitable. So if I'm overstaffed or if I'm understaffed, this will help them understand whether we need to go, on a recruiting blitz, depending on what the market holds and what our expectations are and what our projections are. Or, if I'm working with my finance team, they understand that, maybe at this point I'm going to have to, go ahead and procure a few more individuals for a certain type of role based upon how efficient things are or how effective the team is being with the amount of volume that we're bringing in. The goal is always to run lean, right? And have as least amount of overhead as we possibly can. But we also know that we can lose more business by being ineffective and not having enough runway and bandwidth to be able to account for the ebbs and flows in the market. So working with the finance team gives us full optics on what opportunities we have to potentially bring in more people or become more efficient from a financial perspective.
Love that. That's awesome. And really the watching organizations to come in with it's very frequently an operations leader just like you, right? Who says, I see the need for this visibility, but the unlock really stemming from linking up with HR and finance and being able to go through that capacity planning piece and to recognize those financial benefits of being more strategic as well. One of the things that I appreciated in our previous conversation that I'd love to bring to light for others was for how fantastic of a job Preferred Rate has done at rolling out ActivTrak. You yourself have shared we're not done yet, right? There's more that we can do. There's more that I want to get out of this solution. Would you mind sharing with those in today's session what not done yet means and what you're looking forward to doing in the future?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when we first started, using the platform, I kept it very close to the cuff in terms of being the one that was kind of administrating and going through. I wanted, because of my role and the culture that I have here, I wanted to make sure that, I was the one controlling the messaging and helping people understand the means behind the use of the software. And as I stated before, it initially started as an accountability tool. And after learning more about the platform, once we had rolled it out, I wanted to make sure that my staff understood that it was put in place to physically help them understand how they can be more effective on a daily basis. I want to turn this into a solution to where this drips down to each individual and they could physically see that on their own and understand this is a great measurement of how they can manage their days and work through their goals so that way they could be more effective and efficient while still trying to manage their personal time, take their breaks, and get done what's expected of them during their time frame and during that productive period that we've set forth. I don't want to set anybody up for failure. And if I didn't explain to them exactly how this was being leveraged or giving them the optics into this so that way they can change, their actions, there's no way for them to succeed in this environment. So transparency is one of my core components here in our culture. And I need to make sure that that core value emulates through this process as well. So it's more about leveraging this on a per employee basis so they could reflect. And I am going to start doing that at some point in time and not just make this a leadership opportunity, but to make this an individual opportunity. We've gone through some coaching. I'm working with a company called Mortgage Champions currently with a gentleman named Dale Vermillion. And he's been a godsend for us because he's helping us understand, how to manage things in certain capacities throughout our enterprise, whether it's the operational side of things or the production side of things. And this is going to fit right into the narrative that he's helping us create inside of our organization. So I'm looking to pair that up as part of our initiative so that way people can actually see and live what he's kind of preaching to us.
It's so interesting, the insights with no place to go lend themselves to the greatest risk, right? And so from my perspective, what I see is when you have these insights and you don't direct them with a purpose, the question becomes, why are you collecting the insights? And what I appreciate about your approach to this and your approach in the future is, okay, we're going to bring in an individual who's going to help us see exactly what we need to do, and where, not to suggest your team isn't doing that themselves, but you're going to bring in some support, get more understanding on exactly where you want to prioritize, and then go apply the ActivTrak metrics to take the next turn of the crank so that you can direct those insights to solve a problem, right? And I think that that's just such a critical piece to where I see the discrepancies between our best-in-class customers and those who are struggling a little bit to find their footing, right? Which is visibility for the purpose of visibility can lend itself to sometimes an eyebrow raise. Why? For what purpose? Where? Who? When? How often? Versus we're on a mission to solve for more distinctive capacity, or more data-driven capacity planning, or more efficiency, or greater cost optimization, and then applying those metrics, right, is really can make all the difference in that level of acceptance. So I certainly appreciate the way that you're thinking about that. Have you handled employees in the past? I'm going to ask a question that I know hasn't come up in the Q&A, but I'd be shocked if out of 50 plus people on the call, this one doesn't run through their head. Have you handled situations in the past where employees have been skeptical? And if so, how have you handled that?
Yes, absolutely. There's a few different things that I want to point out with that. Okay. So initially, when we started rolling this out, people did have those questions. Why are you watching me? Did I do something wrong? Is there something that I need to know? Is this legal? Are you spying on me? Are you invading my privacy? So when that comes up, full disclosure, the way that I approach that is I simply explain this is a piece of software that we're leveraging as an organization to help them be a better professional and to help them understand how we can assist them in being more efficient and effective in their current role, and to ensure that if they aren't, the whys behind it, so that way we could deploy certain measures to assist them and make them better. Our goal is to train them up and to give them every tool within our means to give them the opportunity to succeed in their environment, right? And at this point, I don't personally believe that anybody is thinking that this is a negative measure that we've deployed over time, because we've shown them with the deployment of new software and different items that have made them more efficient, whether it's the new web version of our LOS platform where we originate all of our loans, which went from a desktop-based platform to a web-based platform, which brought a whole bunch more efficiency and effectiveness to it, right? Or something like our new income calculation tool that my underwriting team is using, which gives us a better insight into calculating income for qualifying any sort of client or borrower. And it uses AI, right? Previously, we were doing things longhand on an Excel workbook. So I am showing them the returns on our ability to leverage a platform like this, as opposed to it just hanging out in the background. Again, transparency is a core value here. And the more you educate them as to the why, and you're proactively preaching that to them, they'll have an understanding, and you won't get the pushback. You won't get the negativity or the stigma that just seems like you're remoting into a machine just to prove that they're at their desk at 10:07 a.m.
Yeah. Yeah. I certainly appreciate the approach, and have seen our customers again have the most success with adopting one in that way. And I'm excited to see what's ahead for you guys, because truly, the full hub and spoke vision, right, is that someone like you can collect these insights, but someone who is more of an individual contributor can go in and assess their own insights and make their own decisions and have some level of agency in these types of conversations. I want to go back though to Chris's world and Chris's Pierce's world. When we think about leveraging these insights at the top of the organization, the goal is to I will forever see the time 10:07 for the rest of the day, but I'm going to keep picking at that, right? Your goal is not to look at the 10:07 activity. Your goal is to look at the activity over the course of the week or the course of the month or whatnot. One of the previous things you've expressed interest in is that financial loss analysis capability that ActivTrak has rolled out, really designed for a leader like yourself to make some of those decisions. Can you talk a little bit about what it was that excited you about that type of capability, and what that has meant for you since you've gone forward with it, adopting it?
Yeah, so the biggest thing for me was, being able to measure, their capacity and what our expenditures were and what we're leveraging on a daily basis as far as the technology platforms are concerned, because you want to be able to, use everything that you're paying for to its fullest capability, and it has actually given us a keen sense of where we could cut some fat and where we can lay into some of the deficiencies that we've been exposed to, since we've started using that part of the platform. We've noticed that time that maybe we've been running a little leaner than we should have been. Maybe we're putting a little more onus, on the staff than we should have been. And maybe the expectation was a little bit higher, and maybe growth was in order because of where the volume was and where our growth was overall. I mean, we've out recruited the market by 32% in our industry. And, we've been doing it on a very similar level of staffing. So, knowing that we have room to grow from a financial perspective because of these insights has given me the ability, again, to collaborate with HR and say, hey, let's go find a few more people to add to the staff. We could use X, Y, and Z role. And that gave us some great, information to be able to make that decision.
Fantastic. That's a great story. Well, I want to be cognizant of time. I know we've got a couple more minutes, and so I will certainly use them all up. But I actually, I'm gonna use them, and I'm gonna go to questions in a minute here. But Chris, anything that you haven't shared that, maybe well, you were brushing your teeth this morning or driving to work, you thought, I think I'm gonna share that soundbite, or I'm gonna share that thought. Anything I haven't asked you that might be running through your mind that you'd like to share with others like yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. I would basically tell people, don't be afraid of the remote workforce. I really think that there's a bad stigma surrounding it. I do think that, people, when they have a better work-life balance, will give you more. I think that they feel a higher sense of loyalty to the organization. I also truly believe that, there's a lot less toxicity that goes on in the culture if you give them the opportunity to interact as needed and not be beholden to those having a water cooler conversation, if you would. That drags people down, and it gives them a sense of being in a toxic environment, or maybe even a hostile work environment, depending on what kind of situation and scenario is going on inside of that office. And I had a staff for years that was specifically in office, wake up every day, drive 45 minutes to the office, sit at your desk, dread the rush hour traffic, ride home. I'm in California personally. If I had everybody that's local to me here drive in and out of my office on the 405, they'd probably want to quit and pull their hair out, because everybody around me is allowing remote work. So, I think of that each and every day because of how successful I've been in being able to analyze and see what the benefits of remote work is. And without ActivTrak, I would just be operating on some back of the napkin calculation or some sort of assumption that, oh, people need to be in the office, they're not being more efficient, rather than seeing hey, the software platform that you have these folks on is really dragging them down. Or, hey, the Teams platform is, really sucking down the bandwidth of their computer and it's dragging down what else it is that they're doing. Maybe you should look at another messaging platform, or maybe you should change your technology vendor for your phone service specifically because your video software is not allowing them to work and function when they're having those important calls, with the field and their loan originators to work through a difficult loan scenario. So there's just been a lot that we've poured into this to make sure that we're putting the best players on the field. And I can't stress that enough. When COVID first initially happened and everybody kind of had to scatter and, kind of reinvent themselves, I was scared. I'm not going to lie. I was definitely afraid of it because I felt like we were going to really have a hard time getting people to understand, what was expected. And setting the expectations were one thing, holding them accountable was another, and actually being able to measure that was a completely different animal. And this kind of brought that, to my world.
Fantastic, fantastic. Well, I'm gonna close this out here, and we've got a couple questions that I know that we can follow up on, and I'm happy to do that. But how fortunate are we to have someone like you, Chris? So thank you so much for the partnership. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts and your observations with those on the call. Very grateful for the steward that you've been, and we appreciate you making the time.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yes, thank you to both of you for being here with us today. Just a quick housekeeping items. One, I did want to just kind of check with people and see what they thought, if they would like more sessions like this. So we're going to go ahead and pop up this poll. Really would like to know if you enjoyed today's session. I know I did. And then also if there are, any other topics that you would really like to see sessions on, I'd really love to get your feedback on that so that we can, develop future programming that is of interest and is helpful to y'all. The other thing is just a friendly reminder, we did record today's session and we will go ahead and send that out to y'all to the email address that you registered with. So with that, we will go ahead and close things out. Thank you again, Chris, so much. And Gabriella, really appreciate both of each of your time. And I hope y'all have a great rest of your week. That goes for everyone. Thanks so much for joining us.